After my wife died, my family slowly forgot I existed. I called, I visited, I cooked holiday meals and waited for someone to show up. 10 years passed and not one person did. Eventually, I stopped trying. I sold the house, closed every account, changed my number, and disappeared without telling anyone where I went. A year later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end said something that made me sit down. Nobody warns you that grief comes with an attendance sheet. My wife died at 6:12 on a Thursday morning in March in a hospital room with a view of the parking garage. Holding my hand, pancreatic cancer, 5 weeks from the scan to the funeral, which is the cruelest speed there is. Long enough to watch her turn into someone smaller, not long enough to say a fraction of what 34 years builds up. She was 56. I was 57. We had a coffee can in the pantry with the word Italy written on it in masking tape, and inside it was $1,283 in 20s and loose change, because every Friday for 11 years she dropped whatever was left in her wallet into that can and said, "One day, Mr. We never went." The can is in a box in my closet right now, and I still haven't counted past what I counted the week she died, because counting it again feels like admitting the number is finished. I want you to know who she was, because everything that happened afterward only makes sense if you understand the size of the whole. She hummed show tunes when she drove and denied it at every red light. She alphabetized the spice rack and then never once used it alphabetically. She left her reading glasses in the junk drawer, the bathroom, the car, the garden, and one memorable time the freezer. And every time I found a pair, I would hold them up and she would say, "I was looking for those," in a tone that made it my fault. She was the entire architecture of my ordinary life. When she died, the house kept standing. The walls, the roof, the furniture, none of it meant anything anymore. It was just lumber arranged in the shape of a marriage. In her 4th week in a hospital, when we both knew, and neither of us was saying it out loud. Yet she made me bring an index card and a pen from the gift shop. She dictated her mother's pot roast recipe to me line by line and corrected me 3 times about the brown sugar. A tablespoon, not a teaspoon, she said. "Do you want to ruin me twice?" Her handwriting was gone by then, so it's my handwriting on the card, but they're her words, right down to the part at the bottom where she made me write low and slow, and don't you dare rush it. Then she took my hand and said, "The thing that ran the next 10 years of my life. Keep Sundays," she said, "even if it's just you and the gravy, but it won't be just you." She was right about a lot of things in 34 years. She was wrong about that. 81 people signed the guest book at her funeral. I counted because I'm a man who counts things. 31 years. Drafting survey plots for the county records office will do that to you. You spend 3 decades measuring property lines to the hundredth of a foot. You stop being able to round things off, even things that would hurt less rounded. The family all came. Of course they came. There was a casserole schedule and a socially acceptable place to cry. I should give you the cast because this story has won, and I'm not going to use their names. They don't deserve the dignity of names anymore. And besides, you know these people. Everybody knows these people. My older sister, 61 at the time, 40 minutes away, a woman with strong opinions about the correct way to load a dishwasher and a habit of saying, "We'll do better the way other people say." Bless you. My younger sister, 2 hours away, perpetually busy, perpetually just about to call. My daughter, 27, when her mother died, 45 minutes away, married to a man who sells commercial flooring and watches television in sweatpants with the focus of a surgeon. And my son, 24, single, living exactly 12 minutes from my front door. I know it's 12 minutes because one Sunday in the 2nd year, I drove it with a stopwatch running on the Passenger seat just to confirm I wasn't being unreasonable. 12 minutes, no. Traffic. At the reception, my older sister gripped my arm and said, "If you need anything at all, you call us." I nodded. I believed her. I did not know yet that anything at all has a very narrow definition, and that the definition is nothing. The first Sunday after the funeral, I cooked. I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I took down the index card, and I made the pot roast, and I got it wrong. Too dry. Carrots mushy, gravy thin. My daughter ate 2 helpings anyway, and said it was almost as good as Mom's, and I had to leave the kitchen and stand in the garage for a minute because almost was the kindest word anyone had said to me. In a month, that first Sunday, the house was full. My sisters bickering about something that happened in 1989. My son and son-in-law arguing about a quarterback. The smell of the roast in the curtains, the good plates out, water. Rings on the table I didn't wipe up. Because for one evening, I wanted the house to look lived in again. I stood at the sink and thought, all right, we hold the line at Sundays. We're going to be okay. I have never been more wrong about anything, and I once spent 2 days surveying the wrong parcel. I cooked 52 Sunday dinners that first year. I have the grocery receipts. I kept everything that year the way you do when you're afraid of forgetting, and the receipts tell the story better than I can. 5 pounds of chuck roast in April, 5 lb in June, 4 pounds by September, 3 by Christmas, because they faded not all at once. Fading never happens all at once. That's what makes it fading instead of leaving. Leaving, you can point to. Fading just happens around you, like light going out of a room so slowly you don't notice until you can't read your own hands. My older sister came to 6 Sundays before the conflict started. My younger sister's 2-hour drive became a once-a-month drive, then a holidays drive, then a phrase she used, I keep meaning to make that drive. My daughter and son-in-law were busy in the way young couples are busy, which is to say, busy with things they chose and would not name. And my son with the 12 minutes came for 3 months, and then started letting my calls ring through to a voicemail box that told me in his own recorded voice that he'd get back to me. In November of that first year, 8 months after the funeral, I started the stenopad. I want to be honest about the stenopad because it's the part of this story where people decide what kind of man I am. It's a green stenopad from the junk drawer, and I ruled the columns myself with a straight edge because of course I did, and in it I recorded every phone call I received from my family. Date, person, duration, reason. Not the calls I made, the calls I received. People hear that, and they think, what kind of man keeps a ledger on his own family? And the answer is a man who measures things for a living, who is standing in a quiet house, who has begun to suspect that the quiet is not in his head, and who wants to know the truth more than he wants to feel better. Year 1 final tally, 14 incoming calls between 4 adults. My older sister, 5. My younger sister, 3. My daughter, 4, of which 2 were her. Phone dialing me from her purse. My name, said by accident into a room of muffled laughter that wasn't for me. My son, 2. One of those was to ask whether I still had his camping gear in my garage. 14 calls, 365 days. I had the gear. I told him it would be here whenever he came by. It stayed in my garage for 9 more years. My granddaughter was born in June, 3 years after my wife died, on a morning when the peas out front had gone ridiculous. And I remember thinking, well, there it is. There's the reason to stay upright. My wife never met her. That's a sentence I've had to carry around for years, and it has never once gotten lighter. She died 3 years before that little girl took her first breath, and I think that's part of why I loved her the fierce way I did right from the hospital window. She was the only person in the family my grief never touched. The only one with no before. Everyone else looked at me and saw the husk of a thing. She looked at me and just saw a grandpa. I drove to the hospital the day she was born with a yellow knitted blanket on the passenger seat. My wife had made it years earlier for some day, and it had been sitting in the cedar, chest and tissue paper waiting out a decade like it knew something. I handed it to my daughter in the recovery room and told her what it was, and she said, "Oh, that's so sweet, Dad," and laid it on the chair beside her bag. Years later, the Christmas I helped carry boxes in from their garage, I found that blanket wadded around a carton of ornaments, packing material, one corner gone gray with dust. I didn't say anything. I refolded it, set it on top of the box, and carried the box inside. I'm telling you about the blanket now because I never told anyone then, and a story is the only place some things ever get to be said. I wasn't invited to her first birthday party. I found out it happened from my older sister, who mentioned it sideways, the way you mention weather. There was a petting zoo. The goat ate a napkin. You should see the pictures. I waited that whole evening for an explanation that never came. And then I did the thing that became the spine of the next 7 years. I bought a birthday card and I drew in it. Drafting is the only art I ever learned, but it turns out 31 years of precision gives you a clean line, and a clean line is most of what a kid wants. In the first card, I drew a duck because she had a rubber one. I'd seen it in a photo. The second year, a tractor. The third year, a sailboat with her name on the hull. And no, I'm not telling you the name. I mailed every card 3 days before her birthday. First class, our address in the corner, and I never once heard whether a single one arrived. My daughter never mentioned them. The girl was too small to write back. I mailed them anyway. You want to know the most embarrassing thing about me? It's hope. It has always been hope. I did get her in person sometimes. Those early years, not often rationed, but sometimes. When she was 3, they dropped her with me for an afternoon because a babysitter fell through, and we fixed the loose porch step together, which is to say, I fixed it, and she ran the quality control department. I'd set the level on the board, and she'd crouch over it with her hands on her knees, dead serious. And when the bubble slid into the center, she'd say, "B, approved. Next board." We did the whole step that way. B, it is one of the 4 or 5 best afternoons of my entire life, and it cost her parents nothing, and they never offered me another one. The visits thinned the way the Sundays had. The year she turned 5, I had 3 visits scheduled and 3 visits canceled. A stomach bug, a makeup soccer game, and the third time, no reason at all. Just we've got so much going on right now, Dad. Delivered through a screen door. That third cancellation was on a Thursday. On Friday, I sat down at my kitchen table with her 5th birthday card, and I drew her a horse. Best drawing of my life. Man in the wind, one hoof up, the whole animal leaning into a turn. I worked on it for 3 hours, shading the muscle along the shoulder with the side of the pencil, and I am not ashamed to tell you that a 65-year-old man cried onto a birthday a card at his own kitchen table because the horse was the visit. The horse was everything I had been trying to hand them for 4 years, drawn small enough to fit in an envelope mailed into a silence that never wrote back. There's one more thing from those years I need you to have because of where the story ends up. That first Christmas after my wife died, I took her recipe card, the pot roast card, my handwriting, her words, down to the print shop and had 2 copies made on good cardstock. I gave one to my daughter and one to my son. I told them, "This is your mother's. It shouldn't die with me." My son left his on the counter and I mailed it to him later. My daughter looked at hers for a long moment, and for 1 second something moved behind her face, and then she said, "Thanks, Dad," and put it in her purse. And we never spoke of it again. Remember, The card. It matters later. Everything. In this story turns out to matter later. That's the trouble with paying attention. In year 5, I did what the people in the grief pamphlets tell you to do. I used my words. I drove the 40 minutes to my older sister's house on a Saturday, sat at her kitchen table, and told her the truth with the bark off. I said, I'm not okay. I'm lonely in a way that has started to feel like a medical condition. I cook every Sunday for people who don't come. I call and nobody calls back. I'm not asking for much. I'm asking to be remembered while I'm still alive to notice. My sister put her hand over mine and her eyes went warm and wet. And she said, oh, honey, we love you. We're all just so busy. We'll do better. We'll do better. I drove home and added the conversation to the steno pad in the notes column, and then I waited to see what better looked like. Better turned out to look like a text 3 weeks later. A photograph of a sunset with no message attached, and then nothing until Thanksgiving. I tried my younger sister by phone because 2 hours is 2 hours. I got most of one sentence out. I've been struggling since, and she cut in with the voice she's used on me since 1974 and said, I'm going to be honest with you because nobody else will. You have got to stop being so sensitive. We have lives. Mom and Dad coddled you, and this is the result. I was 62 years old. I was being told I was coddled by a woman I once drove 400 overnight to bail out of a timeshare. I said, okay. I said, you're probably right. I hung up and stood in the kitchen with my hand still on the phone, and somewhere in me, quietly, professionally, the way a surveyor closes a file, something began to measure the property line between me and these people and found the markers weren't where everyone claimed they were. I had a counselor in those years, Thursdays, twice a month, a folding chair in a community center room that smelled like instant coffee and crayons. She was younger than my daughter and smarter than my whole family. And one Thursday, she asked me the question I'd been driving around for years. What would happen, she said, if you stopped cooking on Sundays? I can't, I said. I promised her, and she let that sit for a second. And then she said, you promised her you'd keep Sundays. You didn't promise her you'd keep setting 6 plates. I didn't say anything. I was angry at her for most of a week, which is how I've always been able to tell when somebody hands me the truth. Then came year 6 and the loan, and I need to walk you through the loan because the loan is where I stopped being able to lie to myself, and a man who can't lie to himself anymore is a dangerous thing to take for granted. My son called me. The phone rang and his name was on it, and my heart did the pathetic dog-like thing it still did back then. He was in trouble. A food trailer venture with a friend, equipment leases signed. Personally, the friend gone to Arizona, the leasing company sending letters with red ink on them. He needed $24,000 and he needed it inside of 2 weeks, and he sat at my kitchen table for the first time in over a year, and he said, Dad, I know I haven't been great about keeping in touch. I gave him the money, all of it, $15,000 by wire that Friday, and $9,000 more the following Tuesday. And I'd do it again, and I want to be clear about why. Not because I'm a soft touch, because he is my son, and his mother would have mortgaged her own hands for him, and because some last, unkillable part of me thought, maybe this is the door. Maybe gratitude succeeds where pot roast failed, and for a while, you know what it did? 2 years of it. He paid me back $1,000 a month. First of the month, 24 months, never missed once. And during those 24 months, I had a son again. Dinner once a month. A call on my birthday, both birthdays, both years. He came by and finally took the camping gear, then brought it back, then borrowed it again. I let myself believe we'd found our way to something. The last payment cleared on a Friday in October, $1,000 even. And in the memo, line, the same single word he typed 24 times in a row. Loan, not thanks, not love you, not one more month, and we're square, old man. Dinner's on me. Loan. 24 bank statements that read like a man. Keeping a stranger satisfied. He came by 11 days after that final payment. Stayed 40 minutes. Took a container of chili out of my freezer, and then I did not hear my son's voice for 224 days. I know the number because of the stenopad, and I know what the number means because I'm not a stupid man, just a slow one. The debt was the relationship. The ledger was the love. The minute the column zeroed out, so did I. Year 9, I turned 66 on a Sunday, and I cooked my own birthday dinner. Pot roast, low and slow. Don't you dare rush it. 6th place settings, the good plates, water, glasses, the whole liturgy. I lit a candle for my wife the way I had on every one of my birthdays since she died. Because she's the one who made birthdays around here, and somebody had to keep the franchise open. I called all 4 of them that week with a date and the time, and I told them no gifts, just call me. My older sister texted that morning a balloon emoji and the words, celebrate with 3 exclamation points. My younger sister called for 4 minutes, 2 of which concerned her neighbor's fence. My daughter sent a card that arrived 2 days late, signed by all 4 of them in her handwriting, including the 6-year-old's. My son sent a gift of a cartoon cake, and the candles on it flickered in a loop on and on, never going out and never being wished on, which is the most accurate piece of art anyone has ever sent me. I ate at the head of my own table at 6 o'clock with 5 empty chairs, and I want to be honest with you about that night because this is the part people get wrong about men like me. I wasn't weeping into the gravy. It was worse than that. I sat there doing arithmetic. I sat there with a fork in my hand, 66 years old, doing 10s and 1s in my head. 14 calls in year 1, 9 in year 2, 11 in year 3, 7 in year 5, 5 so far that year. A line on a graph that any draftsman could extend with a ruler all the way down to the axis, all the way to the place where a man becomes a rumor in his own family. That was the night the idea was born, I think. Not the decision, the idea. They're different animals. An idea sits in the backfield. A decision walks up to the house. The decision came at Easter, year 10. I cooked for 9 that Easter because hope is a hard habit to kill, and I had let it live too long. Pot roast and a ham, both scalloped. Potatoes, the rolls my wife liked from the bakery by the bank, a lemon thing. For dessert that the 6-year-old had once eaten 2 pieces of in a different geological era. 3 of them said, maybe is what they'd been saying for years, because maybe costs nothing on the day you say it, and everything on the day you mean it. By 5:30, no headlights. By 6:15, 2 texts. So sorry. The kids. Rain check. By 6:40, I was standing at the trash can with the roasting pan, and I did something I had never done in 10 years of Sundays. I didn't get out the containers. I didn't feed the freezer. One more labeled brick of hope. I tipped the pan, and a full pot roast slid out whole, and it made a sound when it hit the bottom of the bag, and I'm not going to describe that sound except to tell you I only ever needed to hear it once. I stood at that trash can for a long moment with the empty pan in my hands, and the decision didn't crash into me. It let go the way ice lets go of a roof. A weight that had been creaking all winter just released all at once and slid and was gone, and the house it left behind was very quiet and very light. I washed the pan. I dried it. I sat down at my table, the cleared, wiped, empty table with the steno pad and a fresh page, and at the top of the page in block letters, in draftsman's hand, I wrote one word, plan. People imagine disappearing is complicated. It isn't. It's a punch list. I've been drawing other men's boundaries my whole career. I drew my own in 11 weeks. Item 1, the House. I didn't call the realtor in. Town, the one whose face is on the bus. Bench, who knew my family and would. Talk. I called a woman from a firm 3 towns over, and she walked my house in. 14 minutes flat, heels on the hardwood. My wife picked, and she said, $3.95. Maybe more if we're patient. I said, $39.75, and we're not patient. It's sold in 19 days cash to a young couple with a dog and a baby on the way. At the closing, the wife told me the kitchen was the reason. People always say something at closings, and I've decided to keep that one. Item 2, the money. Everything out of the hometown bank, where the teller knew my name into. Accounts at an institution with no branches, nothing illegal, nothing hidden from any government, just relocated beyond the reach of casual snooping by anyone whose maiden name might pass for verification. I am told. My older sister considers this paranoid. My older sister once recited my address, birthday, and mother's maiden name to a caller claiming to be from the electric company. So, I'll stand by my paperwork. Item 3, the phone. 19 years I'd had that number. It predated flip phones. It was the number my wife dialed from the hospital payphone in week 2 when her cell died. The number on the funeral home paperwork, the number my children did not call. I sat on hold for 40 minutes to cancel it, and when the young man on the line asked if I was sure, since I'd had the number such a long time, I laughed in a way that I think frightened him and said, "Son, nobody uses it. I bought a new phone the same afternoon at the new number. I gave it to no one." That's almost true. Hold on, we're getting there. Item 4, destination. I didn't flee to anywhere. I selected. I spread the state map on the cleared table, and I took the drafting compass my wife gave me our first Christmas, and I set the point on our town and drew a circle at 3 hours driving distance, far enough that nobody drops by. Close enough I could come back for a funeral. Old habits. Then I went around the circle with a pencil and shortlisted anything on water, because my wife always said she thought better looking at water, and I had 10 years of thinking to do about nothing at all. I found it on the second weekend of looking. A town on a lake, 1 hardware store, 1 bookstore, 1 diner with a pie case, a trail that runs the whole shoreline, a 2-bedroom rental house 2 blocks up from the water, propane heat, a kitchen, window facing the lake. I signed a year's lease under my own legal name, because I want this understood. I did not hide. Hiding is for people who owe something. I just stopped forwarding myself to people who'd marked me return to sender for a decade. There's no forwarding order on my mail. There's no note on the counter. A note implies someone is owed an explanation, and I had spent 10 years explaining myself to voicemail. Item 5, packing. You want to know what 34 years in a whole house boil down to when nobody's watching and nothing has to be kept for show? 1 truck bed, her photographs, her reading glasses, all 4 pairs, junk drawer, bathroom, car, garden, the coffee can that says Italy, contents uncounted, my drafting tools, my books, the cast iron skillet with the recipe card in its plastic sleeve tucked inside it, wrapped in the good dish towel, the furniture, skate, the freezer I emptied into the bins the night before trash day, 40-some containers, masking tape labels in my handwriting, a decade of Sundays nobody came to, gone down the drive in a county truck at 7 a.m. while I drank my coffee on the porch and felt nothing but the cup. And then item 6, the last item on the page, the one I wrote, smaller than the others. My granddaughter was turning 7 that June. 3 days before I left, I sat at the kitchen table one final time with a birthday card, a fox on the front of it. And inside I drew her a little lake with a little house on it and smoke from the chimney. And underneath the drawing I wrote 8 words. I counted them, of course I counted them. If you ever need me, call this number. And then the new number printed clean, the way I print elevations. Not where I was going, not. Why, not a word against her mother. Just. A door drawn to scale, mailed first. Class with a flag stamp from the post. Office on the morning I left town. Because the adults had all earned the silence. Every one of them. 10 years of evidence. 14 calls and we'll do better. And stop being so sensitive and 24 memo. Lines that all said loan. But she was about to be 7. She ran the level 4. Me on the porch step. Be approved. She never got a vote in any of this. So I left one door open, one card wide, and then I walked through my house the last time, stood a minute in the kitchen, where my wife told me to keep Sundays. Said I'm sorry out loud to the empty room, and meant it in a way I couldn't have explained to anyone. Locked the front door, left the key in the lock box, and drove 171 miles north without turning on the radio. The first thing the lake taught me is that quiet is not the same thing as silence. My old house had been silent for 10 years. The new one was just quiet, and the difference is everything. Silence is a phone that doesn't ring. Quiet is a phone you've stopped listening for. It took a while to get there. I'll be honest about the while. The first month I checked the new phone like it was a patient. It sat charging on the kitchen counter, and some mornings I looked at it before I looked at the coffee maker, which for a man like me is practically idolatry. Nothing. It had nothing to give me. One number existed in the world that could reach it, writing in an envelope with a fox on it, and I had no way of knowing whether that envelope ever made it past my daughter's mailbox. By month 4 I had stopped checking. By month I had built my piece the way you build anything that lasts, one plain board at a time, and the piece said, the card is gone. She intercepted it, or it's in a landfill, or it's in a drawer. Either way, the door I drew got painted over. And that is the risk you accept when you leave a door in someone else's house. So I lived, and I want to put the living on the record, because this is the part everyone skips when they tell stories like mine, and it's the part that matters. I walked the lake trail every morning at 6:30, 6.1 miles, the whole shoreline in fog and rain, in the kind of January cold that makes your face feel like a borrowed thing, escorted the entire way by geese with the manners of toll collectors. I learned the trail the way I used to learn a parcel. Every culvert, every washout, the bench at mile 4 with somebody's initials and the date, 1977. Tuesdays, the bookstore. The man who owns it is my age, wears the same gray cardigan in 3 colors, and holds opinions about Western novels the way other men hold grudges. We argued about them for an hour every Tuesday across his counter, and he was wrong about most of it, and it became, without either of us saying so, the best hour of my week. He never asked what I was doing in town. Towns like that one are full of people nobody asks, and Sundays I kept Sundays. I want that understood, because I made a promise to a woman in a hospital bed, and I have kept it every week for 11 years, including every week since I left. 2 pounds of chuck instead of 5, 1 plate instead of 6. The card in its plastic sleeve propped against the salt, low and slow. Don't you dare rush it. I never broke the promise. The promise was Sundays. It was never an audience. It took me a decade in a counselor in a folding chair to learn the difference, but I learned it, and I sat at my small table by the window with the lake going dark, and I ate every bite, and most weeks I'll have you know it was outstanding. I slept. That's the other thing. 11 hours the first night in the new house, and 7 or 8 a night ever after, when for 10 years I had been a 3 a.m. man lying in the dark doing arithmetic. It turns out a phone that never rings is only heavy if you're waiting for it. Unplug the waiting, and it's just a phone. It's just a house. It's just a life. And it was mine, and it was I would have told you by the end of that winter. Enough Then June came around again, and I did the one selfish thing I allowed myself. In the whole affair, she was turning 8. I had told myself all year I wouldn't, that the fox card was the door, and a man only gets to draw one. But I walked past the drugstore rack the first week of June, and there was a card with a horse on the front, mine in the wind one. Hoof up leaning into a turn near enough to my horse, the best drawing of my life, that I stood in the aisle while the song on the radio changed twice. I bought it at my table by the window. I drew inside at the lake again, the little house, smoke from the chimney, and this time a tiny figure on the porch, waving underneath the same 8 words, the same clean number. If you ever need me, call this number. I mailed it from the post office in town 2 blocks from my house, and I want to flag that for you because I didn't think anything of it at the time, and it turns out to be the hinge the whole thing swings on. Hey! Small town post office hand cancels. The postmark on that envelope said the name of my town, clear as a survey stake. I mailed it on a Wednesday. Her birthday was the Saturday. And then I went home and made my peace all over again. One board at a time. The first card disappeared into that house and was never heard from. There was no earthly reason to believe the second card would be anything but a second silence. 5 weeks later, on a Tuesday in July at 13 minutes to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was standing at my kitchen window drying the cast iron skillet, and the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. I want to be honest about that, since I've been honest about everything else. 13 months, and the phone had rung exactly 4 times. Twice. A pharmacy, once a wrong number, once the landlord about gutters. The screen said a number I didn't know with the area code of my old city, and my thumb hovered, and the part of me that had built all that piece said, let it go to the recording. I answered on the 4th ring and said nothing. Surveyor's trick. Let the other party establish the boundary. There was a long breathing pause, the sound of a small room, and then a voice came down the line that took 34 years of architecture out of my knees. Grandpa, I put my hand flat on the counter. I remember the dish towel was still over my shoulder, and the lake out the window had gone that hammered tin color it gets before weather. And I remember thinking, with the one part of my brain still drafting, that the last time I heard this voice, it was 2 years younger, and asking me whether the bubble was in the middle. Yes, I said. It's me. It's Grandpa. She exhaled the way you do when a hell thing lets go. And then she started talking low and fast and close to the phone, and what she gave me over the next 11 minutes I am going to set down here as carefully as I have ever drawn anything, because every line of it is a property marker, and I want the record straight. She was whispering because she was in her closet. She had a flashlight. I could hear it click against the phone. It was her mother's old phone, kept charged in the kitchen junk drawer because her little brother watched cartoons on it, and it still worked on the house Wi-Fi, and she had watched her mother type the unlock code enough times to know it, which tells you what kind of mind runs in this family. And God help everyone at skip day generation and landed whole. I asked her slow how she got this number, and she told me in that careful climbing way. Kids explain things when they know there's somewhere they shouldn't be, when the explaining is half confession. There was a diorama, she said, for school. Beaver Dam due Friday. She needed tape, the good tape, and Mom was in the shower, and the good tape lives in Mom's desk in the deep drawer. And in the deep drawer under the checkbook there was a rubber band doubled around a stack of envelopes. 7 envelopes plus a new one on top. Her name on every single one. My handwriting on every single one. And she didn't know it was my handwriting yet, but she would in a minute. 7 of them sealed. Sealed. She said, like never opened. Grandpa, knock. Even the flap, a little. And the 8th one, the new one, the one with the horse, that one was different. That one had been opened and then taped shut. Again with the good tape, the tape she'd come looking for, and I want you to sit with the smallness of that detail, the way I have sat with it, because I have surveyed a lot of lines in my life, and I have never come across one drawn so exactly. Sherry sealed the evidence with the same roll of tape her daughter would borrow to build a beaver dam. She took the whole stack into her closet. She'd been reading them for 9 days, 1 or 2 a night under the winter coats with a flashlight. She did the voices, she said. She didn't tell me what that meant, and I didn't ask because I was using everything. I had to keep my own voice level. She opened them in order. The duck, the tractor, the sailboat with her name on the hull. She described each one to me like inventory, like she was the one keeping the steno pad. Now she read me a line out of the sailboat one. My own handwriting coming back at me. Down the phone. You wrote, "The wind is free and so are Saturdays. Come see me anytime." I don't remember writing that. I remember meaning it for 3 straight years. And when she got to the 5th one, she stopped and her whisper came down even lower and she said, "Grandpa, the horse one, did you really draw that with a pencil?" "I did," I said. "It's the best horse I ever saw," she said. I put it in my backpack in the zipper part, so it doesn't bend. I had to take the phone away from my face for a second. I'm 68 years old. The best drawing of my life spent 3 years in a drawer under a checkbook, and it lives in the zipper part now, so it doesn't bend. Then I asked the question I had to ask, even though some animal part of me already knew it was the wrong door to open or the right one. I said, "Sweetheart, did your mom ever give you any of my cards? Even one?" "No," she said. And then in the same tiny matter-of-fact whisper, she handed me the sentence. I had driven 171 miles and waited 13 months and lived 68 years to be ambushed by. Mom said, "You forgot my birthdays," she said. "But then she told us you died." I said, "What? You died, Grandpa?" She said, patient with me, the way she was patient with the porch boards. "Mom told us before school one day," she said, "you got sick and you died, and the funeral was far away and kids couldn't go. We lit a candle and everything. I drew a picture of you for the funeral, but there wasn't a funeral here, so Mom put it somewhere. I drew you with the level from the steps. Do you remember the steps?" And that is the exact moment on a Tuesday in July that I sat down, not a chair, the floor. I went down the cabinet face with the towel still on my shoulder like a man whose strings had been cut because they had been dead. She told my grandchildren I was dead, stood in a kitchen I had eaten Christmas in, looked at a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old over their cereal and buried me, lit a candle, took delivery of a child's drawing for the funeral of a living man, and put it somewhere. And sitting on that floor, the draftsman in me did the math she must have done. Moved away has a sequel. Moved away invites. Can we visit? Can we call? Why doesn't he? Dead. Closes the file. Dead is the one story with no follow-up questions. It wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was efficiency, the cheapest available way to never explain to her own children what she had done to her own father. And I understood it completely the way you can only understand family. And I have never felt anything so cold. But she wasn't finished with me, because she said, and here her whisper got that wobble in it, because then the new card came, the horse one, and I saw it before Mom did. Grandpa, I saw it on the counter with the mail, and it had your same handwriting. And dead people can't mail a horse. No, I said they can't. And Mom took it away fast, she said. And that night, she was on her computer and there was a map of a town I never heard the name of, and the stamp circle on the envelope said that same town I checked. She had it open on the computer, the map with the little red pin, and when she saw me, she closed it so fast Grandpa, so fast. 5 weeks. The arithmetic assembled itself in my chest. Cold and complete. For 5 weeks my daughter had known I was alive. Known the name of my town, sat at her computer with a red pin in my street, and said nothing. Not to her brother. Not to her aunts. Not to her own children who lit a candle for me. She had found the door I drew, and she had taped it shut with a good tape and put it under the checkbook because opening it meant unburying me, and unburying me meant explaining the grave. And then my granddaughter asked me her question, the real one, the one she had been carrying up the whole call like a stone too big for her pockets, the one I am quite sure she practiced in the closet for 9 days, because she is mine, Jean for Jean, and we're a hearse. She said, Grandpa, if you're not dead, then how come Mom cries every Sunday when she makes the pot roast? I couldn't make a sound. There's a card, she said, whispering it like a secret inside the secret taped inside the cupboard, the high one. It's the recipe. Mom touches it before she starts every Sunday with 2 fingers like this, and her whisper rustled like she was showing me in the dark. And Grandpa, it's the same handwriting as my horse. I figured it out. It was you the whole time. The pot roast is yours, and the cards are yours. And Mom cries at the stove with the fan on so we can't hear. But I hear, and then we eat it. And it's so good, Grandpa. And she watches us eat it. And her eyes are all wrong. And I have to know, since you're alive, why does she cry if you're alive? Did the pot roasty? Is that a thing that can? A door opened on her end, a bigger door farther off with a voice behind it, muffled, rising at the end, the way a mother's voice rises when a house has been quiet too long. Her whisper dropped to almost nothing. I have to go, she said, and I said fast, listen to me. You are not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. Tell her the line went dead. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while. I couldn't tell you how long. The lake went from hammered tin to slate, and somewhere 200 m south, a little girl was putting a flashlight back where flashlights go and walking out of a closet with her face arranged. Then I stood up and I did the only thing left on the punch list. I called the number back. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and I had already started deciding what ringing out would mean when it picked up. Nobody said anything, but I knew. You don't spend 34 years married and 10 years a ghost at your own table without learning the sound of your own family breathing. It wasn't the girl. The room tone was wrong. Bigger, a kitchen, a faucet shutting off, a television on somewhere, and underneath it that particular held breath I had stood in doorways listening to for a decade. The breath of someone deciding whether to let me in. My daughter had the old phone in her hand. She had seen the call log. She knew what number this was, and she said nothing, and I said nothing. And the 2 of us stood in our 2 kitchens, 200 m apart, on the line her own daughter had opened, listening to each other exist. Far off on her end, small, and getting closer, a child's voice asked, who's on the phone? I heard her hand cover the receiver. A muffled word. Another than the hand came away, and the kitchen came back, and the breathing. And my daughter said in a voice I had not heard in 13 months, a voice with 10 years and a candle and a taped envelope, and 1,000 Sunday onions in it. 1 word. Dad. The lake had gone fully gray. The geese were coming up off the water in that long, unraveling line they do at dusk. I looked at all of it through my kitchen window, and I did not say a word. I took the phone away from my ear, and I set it on the counter face up. The call still running, the little timer still counting, her voice climbing up out of it, tiny and tiny, into my quiet house. Dad, Dad, are you there? Dad, please. And I picked the skillet back up off the counter, and I picked the towel up off my shoulder, and I went back to drying.